Once you're aware, you're accountable. We're more aware of it, but we're not getting better. And I think some of it is because I think we're getting the right tools, but those who do, they're not applying them.
People need to be in the place to be able to be self-aware and resilient to remain self-aware, to navigate the gray, especially because things are just going to get more and more and more nuanced.
I think relationship and authentic leadership is about like being able to lead and find wisdom in the midst of that gray. A lot of times you're speaking to something that doesn't exist yet. You're chasing ghosts. There will never be enough. Hey, what's up, guys? I want to welcome you back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It is your boy, Adrian. I am joined today by the one, the only...
Breezy
Clark. Breezy Clark, you, as we're recording this, you are in your Kobe year.
I am. Did you have to think about my age?
No, I didn't think about you. I was just trying to think about how I was going to actually say, like, you're in that, or
dramatic pause. Forgot my age. I wasn't sure.
I know you're 24 years old. Trust me, I know these things. I am, up to date. Anyway, all that being said, Bri, you're 24. So, how was your birthday?
It was good. I feel, birthdays are very ambivalent to me. Usually it's hit or miss on if I'm going to have a good time or not. This one I was pretty content. My idea, the thing is why it is ambivalent is because my mood changes very consistently on a regular basis. And so to plan something that I want to do for my birthday and know that day that's actually what I'm going to want to do. There's nothing worse to me than having to do something that I don't feel like doing. That crushes my mood.
Yeah.
And so to have to plan something like an event and stuff and then it be that day and be like, oh, I don't really feel like doing that. Is the worst thing ever. And that didn't happen this year, which left me very content.
That's a great way to put it because I'm the same way. It's like, my wife, I like surprises at levels, but there's also what you said, knowing okay, if there's going to be a surprise, then what am I preparing myself for? Because I do have to prepare myself, I think sometimes, especially now, about what type of event am I going into, what type of setting I'm going to be in. So it's kind of been so this was the same way for me. My birthday the day after yours. It's we didn't do a whole lot. And I was I was good because it was just I felt like this year I was not in the mood to do a bigger event or whatever. I was just kind of was really low key this year. So I can see that because it is. You have to be in the mood to want to do it. All of a sudden you're playing this big party and you're I don't really want to be around nobody. Yeah. And now you got to fake it. It's your birthday, and you're just all right. Well, that just ruined the whole point.
And then you get home and you're like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You have a whole crisis. You're I'm tired. I don't know. And I'm not a really big quality time person either. That's not something for me. I could not, spend time with somebody for a while and I'm oh, we're still good. I love you. You love me. We're good. So whenever I do something hangouts and parties or stuff, I'm there and I'm
yeah, cool.
I appreciate it, of course, but there's always that unwritten expectations people always have for their birthdays that then the people around them don't ever really know what they should or shouldn't do. And then it's the worst when you get something or you're doing something that somebody's done for you and you don't really like it.
Yeah.
And so we all just kind of pretend we're having a good time because that's a nice thing to do. And I think that's completely okay. But then there's there's a sadness at the same time because it's oh, it's my birthday. For me, I'm oh, I had the best time ever just sitting in my bed watching Gilmore Girls.
It's so true. And what you don't want to do is that you go to those things and you're okay, I've got to. You're oh no, I want this. This is my birthday. I kind of want to take this one day for this day to kind of be a little bit about me. But then sometimes you're but I'm in the mood for people. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the mood for people, then it's hard. You can't just pop that off the day before that same day. Hey, let's get 30 people in the room.
Right.
And so, but no, it's really interesting. And I also think what's also an interesting thing about birthdays is when they think you should have certain things that you should oh no, you should want to be around people, and then they start trying to deal with deeper stuff in your own heart, why don't you like being around people? I think this is something you should try to enjoy. And they try to force it. I'm I just don't want to be around people, or I just don't want to go do this adventure on this day. It may just be like you said, I just want to sit in the bed and just chill out and not do a whole lot. I may be, and and again, I always tell people birthdays are different because you could be in a mood that day, in a mood of like, I'm like, maybe you're sad. Okay, that doesn't mean that like you like hate your life or you don't want to do anything. You just may be sad that day, and it's okay to be able to chill out. So birthdays are very interesting. I know there's a wide gap. You turn 24, I turn 45.
A wide gap.
Yeah, a wide gap of incredible amounts of wisdom, life. And,
respectfully.
Yeah,
I respect
24,
that.
you don't know anything. Anyway, no, I'm just...
Yeah, it's true. I know. Up here, it's just blank. It's completely blank slate.
So at 24, Bri, what are you looking forward to? Is there anything like this year you're looking forward to at 24?
That's like my least favorite question.
Okay, well
that people ask. No, I'll answer it still.
All right.
I'll explain. Well, first off, I think that the cadence for how I think about my life, one, I do think about it like pretty regularly, but also when I'm like futuristically dreaming, it's usually at like the new year, if that makes sense. So I don't ever have like major time that I set aside for my birthday. And also this year, I'm usually a really big, I don't want to say the word planner because I don't have a lot of tenacity. I'm not super detail oriented, and I can hold things kind of loose. But I do like to have vision for the year of what it is that I'm trying to do, within my soul, within my mind, physically. And once I have a vision for that, I can kind of plan it out from there, and make it loose. But this year, one of the biggest things that I thought was important was to take things day by day. And a lot of what we've been talking about is being present and things of that nature. So I genuinely this year, I don't have a ton of things in mind. I have like my core stuff that I know is important to me. Like nutrition will always be important to me. Exercise will always be important to me. What that looks like changes on a daily basis. Yeah. I'm grateful that I have the discipline to kind of operate that way. Not everybody really has that, or has developed that out yet. So I've lived everything pretty much day by day. So even when it was my birthday, I tried to take the time to enjoy the day and where I was at and what I was doing, rather than having that moment where I'm thinking through, what do I want, 24 to be? What do I want it to mean? Because while I do believe in obviously dreaming for your life, I also think that in a lot of what we're talking about, I think that the right things at the same time happen to you. And I also think that the more present you are, the more you will realize what you're wanting to happen and how to make that happen. And I don't know if you can do that in an hour, sitting down on your birthday. I think it's like a daily decision. Yep. I hope that makes sense, but that's a lot more of what I've been practicing. Yeah, no, I think it makes complete sense. I think you're not, it's hard to, it's like this. It's hard to really figure something out, like you said, in like an hour. And I think, I used to try that and I would do it. And then that's why you get like 3 months into it and you're like, oh no, like you completely change it, like going into, so for me I'm like you, I don't really have like this, like, here's my 4 goals for my birthday. I'm kind of a little bit around the year. But normally if I'm going to the year and I'm planning, I'm thinking like now, like I try to live my life in themes. Like what's my theme? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that for this year, if at this age, at 45, I was just like, what do I want? It's like, I just kind of want life, what I want to try to practice. It's just more of having a lot more like, just when I say fun moments, just moments that aren't like where the main things are the main things. I think that's what that's the best way I can explain it. I want the main, some things need to have your attention in the sense that they're like level 5, right? Like frustration or like intensity of focus and things like that. There are some things. But I've realized that so many times I'll make certain things that really are level 1, like level 5. Like in the grand, they don't matter. Like they don't, like they matter, but they don't matter. And I'm just, and I think that can suck away at times, like excitement, joy, or just about anything. So I think just trying to do that, and I think some of that for me is just really, I think things can turn into that when I don't say what I really think, and again, not in some type of crazy way, but in an empathetic way, but a very direct way. And so I think that's just kind of what I'm trying to do this year, just be more direct, but also, if something doesn't matter to me,
in a real thing. Like, because here's the other thing. Something can matter to somebody and it's not be that big of a deal to me. And what they want that is to become a big deal for me. And you're like, and if you don't make it a big deal, then they don't think you care. You're like, no, like, it's just not that big of a deal to me. It may be for you, so I'm not going to make this the top priority on my list if it's not, So just trying to learn how, because it can do that, just takes away from stuff. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to enjoy, where I can look back at life like, no, I actually enjoyed like this year more than others. No matter, and that doesn't mean all things are going to go great. That doesn't mean you're not going to have like ups and downs and trials and tribulations, just life. But you can actually just learn to enjoy life a little bit more. So that's what I'm hoping. So we'll see.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Looking back at the past few years.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you most proud of yourself for?
Interesting. I think what I'm most proud of, I think it's probably all combination of, like, probably just not just one, but it's a combination of things. I think one, or in the combination would be that, I look at my, my marriage and my kids, and like, and overall it's pretty good. Like, my kids aren't perfect, or like no kids are perfect, but they're overall like good kids. And my marriage is in a good place. I've been married for 21 years. And so like, it's in a good place. I think that also in the midst of this last couple of years, like, we lived through pandemic and all that, and we grew a business. We started a business and grew a business to a pretty successful one. And then, having a church that has like now really started to explode. And so I think just doing that stuff, and then still kind of being, where things that are personal to me are still moving in the right direction. So I think those are things that kind of this, I'm like, oh, like, things aren't that bad, I mean, it's a lot of hard work, it's wear and tear, but you're like, things aren't that bad. You've actually built some things. And I think that's what I really reflected on my birthday. When you get like birthday, people send you texts or whatever, or messages. I was talking about this recently to our staff about how I think I felt like inside of me that God had put me here to really make a big impact. And I think I used to get really upset because I wasn't making that impact. But it's not that I haven't been making that impact. It's just it didn't look the way I thought it would look. And so that's the whole thing. And so I think I've been really this year reflecting on people who just send me stuff and just watching stuff they're doing. So it's been a lot of impact in individuals' lives that are impacting individuals' lives, and it's just spreading. So that's where I always feel like I'm supposed to really make an impact globally. And I'm starting to realize I am making an impact globally. It just didn't look the way I thought it would look. Most of the time we think, oh, man, here's this huge platform. And now by this platform, meaning one speaker, one of da-da-da, versus like a lot of it, man, is just through impacting individuals' lives here and there and in groups and whatever. And so anyway, so I don't know. That's a lot that I've been reflecting on. Like, oh, man, it's been, so far I realize that I'm starting to get a little bit more thankful that, God has been very gracious to use me to really impact the lives of people in a positive way. And I think that's just the point why we're here. I think, at the end of the day, if you're not pushing humanity forward, if you're not adding value, if you're not giving power away to make others better, then I think that then I really do think that life and what you're doing I think it's very shallow. And so I just never wanted to live a shallow life. And so I'm starting to evaluate, feel like I'm not living that way. So it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. I know that you're kind of speaking from the place now to where you're in a little bit more in the position of acceptance of that. But that process in itself, I feel like it's one of grief. I feel like whenever you have, for everyone, like whenever you have these fantasies and then you start to hit the age where they're crushed, it's like you're grieving the loss of those things not being fulfilled or the realization that they might not be.
Yep.
How's that process been like for you?
That's a good question. I think it's part of it and it's hard, but again, that's why I tell people, I love the Bible because there's just so much wisdom, and then I'm going to, I'm paraphrasing this, but there's a proverb that talks about like, man has a plan, but it's like God sets the course in Proverbs. So like we have a destination, but it's God who sets the course. And I think what I'm realizing is that that's such a true statement because, and I know it was true, I believe the Bible to be true, but I had this, remember, man, makes impact globally. But I think what I think because of my own brokenness, I was more concerned with the course, because the course to get there means that, oh man, I've got people watching me. I've got this big platform, and that was due to my childhood of, man, not thinking I'm enough. So if I'm not enough, then, man, this gives me validity. And so I think there is that grieving process, but there also is, like, in the grief, there's also hope and some resurrection in that process, because I'm realizing, no, I'm still doing that. The thing I felt, I'm not crazy, because I always felt like, you're supposed to have this global impact. And then I'm like, why is it here? And I used to sit in my therapist's office like, man, I just wish God would take this desire to impact the world. I wish you'd just take it away from me, because I feel like it's cruel. Like you say, I always tell him, I feel like it's cruel, because I literally pray, take this desire from me. But the desire would increase. And so because of that, the desire increasing, it was more the fact of, no, he's doing it a different way. And so it was a grief. It has been. And it's been like, oh, man. But then on the other side of it, there's been hope, because you're realizing, okay, there's greater impact that's there.
Because I believe you were 35 around the time that you feel like you started to really understand who you were and what you wanted to do with your life. And you had, I'm sure, that beautiful mind map of all the things, that you wanted to accomplish. If 35-year-old you was here right now, what would you say to him?
Wow. If 35-year-old is like, I would have told him, listen to what your grandfather told you at 30. I think I was like 32. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather at 32 told me, he was like, most things in life aren't that big of a deal. He was like, there are going to be some main things that are big deals, but a lot of stuff is not. So don't take it too serious. They'd be all right with that. That's what I would say. I think it would have saved me a lot of stress. I think it would have saved me a lot of turmoil. I think sometimes some relationships that I could have done a little bit better, because I saw it a certain way. Everything was so tense. So I would tell myself, like, make the main things the main things, and let the other stuff kind of go by the wayside. And I think the other thing I would say would be this, is that I would tell, probably the other big one I would tell, is like, your intuition a lot of times is right. So just trust it and go with it. It's taken me about 10 years. Probably the last 2 years, I feel like I've really leaned into it. It's more and more, but it's just like, no, your intuition a lot of times is right. And so I would have said that, because so many times you spend so much time guessing and questioning and doing this, and let me go do this, and wasting time going here when you really felt that way. I can't tell you how many, let's think about speaking. How many times I've done sermons where legit, when I was younger, I would know exactly what I wanted to, what I felt like I was supposed to say, like right at the beginning, and I would spend hours going every other different direction. Something that I can't be yet, and then literally I would end in the same place. That probably has happened 100 times, and you're just like, dude, just go with. Now I know. Okay, if I feel this is the way I go. So I probably would say those two things: listen to my grandfather, trust your intuition.
What do you think kept you for so long in the cycle of making a lot of things important that actually weren't?
I think wanting to be the hero of everybody's story. I think that I would want to step in. I would take responsibility for things. I would care for things more than sometimes other people would care for it themselves, because I wanted them to I wanted them to see that I cared for them, and which I did care for them, but also I care for myself, because if I showed you I cared, that means, man, you would need me, and I'd be the hero of the story. And so I felt like that's what kept me there a lot, and also not wanting to be a failure. So everything was just, and I'm naturally like an intense person anyway. So because I'm an intense person, everything is just, it's up here. You got to pay attention to every detail. And here's the thing I've learned. You can pay attention to every detail without emotionally being ramped up to it. So, you know what I mean? So it's like, me, I pay attention to the smallest things. Well, and paying attention, even though I'm ADD to the max, but I pay attention to the small things that matter. Well, I don't have to have crazy intensity on like, hey, why did we not do this? I could just say that, hey, please fix that. But a lot of times what I would do is like, they got to know how serious it is. And so like your emotions get high and it becomes like a 5. And it's like, it's just a 1. It's not that big of a deal. Just say it and move on. If they can't do it, then, or if they don't, then it's like the intensity may ramp up if people constantly keep not doing it. But I think I would just always be at a 5. you know, and just realizing that, like, okay, everything, you know, because there's a lot of fear too, fear that this one thing was gonna make everything go bad, you know, and so just trying to learn. I'm still learning it, like, hey, what level of intensity does it need? Because when you bring something, it's not only the mental energy, you bring emotional energy, and that emotional energy wears on your body. And so I've realized a lot of some of the health things I've had is because I've allowed emotional things to wear on my body. Like I've always said, I didn't live as a self-differentiated leader, so I didn't know where I ended and the next person began. So I think that's been a really important thing trying to learn.
I know this isn't our topic for the day, but I feel like it's interesting and helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I want to break down something that you've said and I guess kind of hear your thoughts on it, because in the beginning of this, you talked about how for your birthday you're feeling like a greater sense of contentment and gratitude towards like the realization that you have impacted people.
Yeah.
And part of why that's such a big deal is because, and I don't want to put words into your mouth, so obviously stop me, is just feeling like you're not enough, and you won't be that for anybody. And then at the same time, something that you just said is that what caused you stress was wanting to be the heroes of people's story. Mm-hmm. And I think because on this podcast we talk a lot about our drivers, you can be doing something that you're supposed to do, but because of the way that you carry it inside, it can crush you. Yeah. And I feel like that shows up a little bit in what we're talking about right now, because I am Christian, and so I don't think you are the hero, but you are a hero in a lot of people's stories. I could name a million of them, you know? So it's at the same time that that was used for good, and that impacted so many people. And at the same time, because of the way that sometimes externally how it would bleed out, but not always how it was working for you internally would be the thing that ended up like crushing you, that more recently you've had to say I have to work on this. Yeah.
No, that's a very good question. It's a good question, good insight. I like to say it this way: once you're aware, you're accountable. I think there's a lot of room we get when we're unaware of certain things. Like, it wasn't like I was sitting there like, you know what, man, I want to be the hero of someone's story. Out of my brokenness of growing up, that I didn't feel like I was enough for my mom or my dad, and I wasn't enough for the city I lived. All this stuff, I didn't think that. It was just like, but also in the same drive, I really did want to help people, and I really felt it. And so God has a way of, even in our brokenness, growing us and still allowing us to impact people. So once you start getting those drivers, because what was happening was that I would find myself helping, making impact in people's lives, but then I would still find myself I would find, in those moments where maybe it didn't go a certain way, and I'd still be so frustrated. Even though I did everything I could, it was the fact of I felt rejected. So if I would help someone, and then, you sacrificially help them, but then they would turn around and walk out, or they would accuse you of not helping them, even though you're like, look at all this. I've always felt at such a deep level, such a rejection toward me. I felt like it spoke that I was not enough. I was not enough for you. So then that goes back to the childhood stuff. And so as more and more time went on, when those moments would hit, I would just do so much reflection, and I started realizing that some of that driver underneath was fuel. I heard something really interesting today. I was listening to it was a Instagram, a reel, and a guy was talking about in the CIA, one of the first things they teach you in the CIA, or one of the things that they realize is that a lot of people they look for are people who are driven, but they tell you a lot of their drivenness, they look for people, and I'm butchering this a little bit, but comes from childhood trauma. They said there's enough childhood trauma that drives you, right? But not enough that makes you, but not where you go to coping, drugs, it's substance, porn, stuff like that. But there's enough that's I got to win because I'm trying to prove something. Mm-hmm. I think that's a lot of people. I mean, I know for me, there was childhood stuff that was there that didn't push me to substance, but it pushed me to drive. I'm trying to prove something to somebody. And that thing I was always been trying to prove is to that inner child inside of me, no, you are enough. And the more applause I can get, or the more people who I've helped, and the more people can say that, it speaks. But what I've come to realize, you're chasing ghosts. There will never be enough. And so now, now where I'm at, it's not that I don't do that same work. The motivation for the work has changed. The reason why I do it has changed. It's not to get your applause. It's not to say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for doing it. It's not to show the world, man, look at me. I've helped this person, that person, and this person's over here, and they're in this industry, and they're doing this thing. It's now saying it's just the right thing to do. And I feel called to do it. So my motivation has changed. So now the results, so here's the big main point. When I help and someone fails, it doesn't crush me. Because I'm not the hero. I'm not Superman. I'm not flying in with the cape on. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not flying with the cape on to save the day for this person. My job is I can give you opportunity, help you all I can. Now, whatever you do with that, that's on you. And my job is to help that. So it's just kind of changed so it doesn't crush me once that it may not go the right way. Also realizing people owe me nothing. Like, that's the other part that I'm trying to get to more and more. And I feel like I'm getting better, not fully there. But, like, man, freely you receive, freely you give. So if I'm giving to you, I can't give you stuff with strings attached unless we've already made a decision. You know what I mean? Like, for example, you working for me, there's a contract that's there. We've agreed on terms. Okay, you do your job, you do your part, I do my part. Okay, that's it. Now, if you decide to break that, that goes a different way. But when I'm saying, man, I'm just trying to help somebody.
I love you for free.
Yeah,
I pay you to do your job.
We
say that around here.
We say it all the time around here. People know that very well. I love you for free. I pay you to do a job. So I will love you and fire you all in the same breath. But no, I think that's just so now. But what I'm giving, there's no strings attached. I think a lot of times people have these strings attached where they're like, oh, well, I did this for you, so you should do this for me. Well, then you're not really giving out of the goodness of your heart. You're giving out of something in the future and stuff like that. And I've learned, man, when you give, the best thing that I can tell you is when you give from a place to just give. I can give you a few different stories. Like, I'll tell one real quick. Because his birthday, actually, day before my day. Yeah, the same day as your birthday. My somebody
Leo
named Jamie.
Baby.
Yeah, my man Jamie Adams. Shout out to my man Jamie. Jamie's out of Chicago. Jamie was played basketball here at Florida A&M. And a friend of ours, Dennis Gates, so he's now the head coach in Missouri. Dennis reached out to me and said, hey, he's transitioning college. He wants to go play professional basketball, but, they didn't have access to their gym over at Florida A&M. So he was like, he needs just a place to work out. And I was like, cool. I was like, it's kind of that whole thing. Dennis is part of the Florida State family. That's Gates' guy. We have this, it's kind of like the Florida State, the New Bloods thing, right? It's like the mafia. I'm joking, but it's like the mob. Okay, you're part of the family. You're part of the family. So Gates says that. Cool. He comes over. Me and Jamie, I was like, hey, man, like, I work guys out. So I was doing training. Yeah, come work out. I'm like, and so I wasn't going to charge him anything. That's Gates' guy, blah, blah, blah. And here's what happened. And I had no idea. Me and Jamie and so in that, we just became really good friends. I love working out. I worked hard, respectful. And then he introduced me to his girlfriend. And then they eventually they got married and all this stuff. And I was just there to just invest in Jamie with no strings attached. He goes on, plays a little bit of basketball. Me and Jamie were really cool. But I didn't realize the impact I made. It was just it was just doing it. And he calls me when he's thinking about retiring. He's like, man, you're the first person I'm calling. I'm like, oh, shoot. I didn't realize I had that impact in his life, right? Then he goes in. Fast forward, Jamie now working at Loop Capital. Incredible, really investment firm. They do so many things across the world. Black-owned. It's amazing what they do. But then he calls me, hey, will you be the godfather of my son? And I'm like, whoa, what am I? But it was just one thing. When I started training Jamie, there was no anything behind that. It was just like, man, this is a young man just trying to get a dream. I had tools to kind of help him, and I got nothing. Jamie has never paid me a dime to do anything. But, man, it was so worth it. But the things I was able to receive back, not just being the godfather's son, there's some other things that Jamie and I have done together. It's just been really cool. So I tell you that story just to say, man, when you invest with no strings attached, just go do it. You have no idea what happened. You may get nothing out of it, but I just have seen, man, it just comes back to you just like tenfold.
Mm-hmm. Something you mentioned this earlier. Correct me if I'm quoting it wrong, but suicide rates have actually increased from those like 60 plus. 65
has gone up. The CDC just came out from 21 to 22 is jumped to 8.5% among those 65 and up, and the highest number of that, which is crazy, of that 65 and up is 80. I think it's 80 or 85 and up. It's like, so the highest number among the 65 and ups are 85 and up.
So not that you're 65. What at your age, you have experienced a lot of things. You've been through a lot of really tough stuff, both emotionally and then also just, generally with the world, externally and internally. Obviously, we just had COVID. And so, I hear that stat and it makes sense to me. Unfortunately, it's not shocking to me that there are so many people in the last leg of their life that are kind of like, why do I want to do this anymore?
Yeah.
What do you feel hopeless about, and what do you feel hope towards?
I feel hopeless. Here's with that stat is because we live in the most affluent society in human history. Not even close. It's not even close. Across the board. We're not talking about just one person, a couple people. We're talking about affluent. It's insane. I am a person who's I say this politically, I kind of sit center right. So I got more of a capitalistic mindset, whatever. But one thing that's really hitting me as I start about hope is that we live in such a fluent society that those who are getting older, man, we're pushing them to the wayside. We don't value the older generation. And what I mean by that, but here's the other thing too. We don't value the older generation, and the older generation doesn't understand where they're at. Meaning that there comes a point where if you've never practiced this, and this is why I practice. So remember, you always know this about me. Everything I do is always there's a point behind it. Why I practice giving power away right now at 45 is because when I get 65, I don't want that to be a new thing for me. That's what happens. People get older. They've always sat at the top of the pyramid, or they don't know how to give it away. And so that's what we're seeing in our government right now, which drives me nuts. We have people who are they can't even do the job. They're staying in power. And it's a travesty. And so that makes me hopeless that we don't value them, the older generation, but the generation doesn't understand where they're at, where there comes a point in time you have to get out of the way. And your job is now to get on the side, not I'm going to the stands, but actually come alongside and be the next generation's greatest coaches. Not to hinder them or stifle them, but to cheer them on and use any bit of wisdom and power you have and influence you have and resources you have to invest in them to be great. So I feel because of that disconnect, I feel hopeless there. Where I do have hope, I have hope in your generation. I'm all in. I'm like Gen Z, I'm fully in. I am fully bought in, chips middle of the table. I believe this generation is going to be incredible. So I do have hope. Because I think that with the right things, the right tools, I also think where life is going to head, if we can help them in a more of a tough, which is going to be some of the topic we get into today, with some of the tough things they're going to be facing, or our world's going to be facing, I think they're going to have the ability to lead through it. I think leaders, that's what I see in Gen Z. I think Gen Z is prime for some of the greatest leaders that our nation has ever known, I think can actually come out of this generation. And so that's where I have a lot of hope.
Why do you think that?
Because I think they have the mix of boomer and the mix of boomer and they have the mix of themselves of being emotionally aware. I think they understand, like when I say stability, they want that. They're kind of like, even though it feels like they jump from thing to thing, statistics just show that, they saw their parents lose half their wealth during 08-09 recession. They've lived through something like that. And I think they want to make an impact that's just beyond themselves. I think they want to make an impact beyond themselves, even though everybody says they're selfish. I think they genuinely do. I just don't think they know how to. The other part, I think they're emotionally aware. I think they're aware of their emotions. And I think the other part, but then the other side, they need to learn how to have resilience. And I think that that's going to come with help of others if they're willing to be. Now, again, that's where this generation has come to. Are they willing to be taught? Are they willing to be taught how to do that? And then also, I think life is going to continue to do that for them. So that's why I feel like they have that great intangible of being able to do it. And that's why, we always joke about it, but, they call it Gen X, like my generation, like kind of like the forgotten generation. But I actually believe Gen X is prime to help lead Gen Z, I believe Gen X generation, I believe there are going to be some incredible leaders that are come out and will be coming out of Gen X that you'll see over the next, kind of 10 to 15 years. You'll start seeing these people just pop up in their 50s and their 60s really doing really great stuff. But I also think they're going to really be able to help millennials. Gen Z is kind of as well.
I think that's a great point you bring up, because even while you're talking, I think about specifically with you even, I do genuinely believe that you're a leader of the future. And so as someone who gets the privilege of working really closely alongside of you, whenever you're thinking about something or whenever you're going through something, I mark it in my head. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to need to remember that 6 months from now. Like, I'm going to need to remember that 1 year from now, and I'm really grateful for that privilege. But even to some of the things that you're working through right now, and like levels of responsibility, there aren't many people who are leading that, like for me, that I can look up to, who have the emotional awareness to work through those things. And so why it's so helpful for me is that I have somebody to look up to who actually understands of what it feels like to bear things inside genuinely. Because most people that I'm looking up to, they don't have as much as a conscious awareness of it. I think that they're aware of like the stress and a little bit of the physical toll and things like that. But as far as processing and working through it, don't really have anybody to look to for that, which is why I think this podcast is so great as a whole, because we get to hear your thoughts on that. But I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate it. And I think that, I hope to be able to lead and do things. And what I've, it's funny, where I've just started to settle when I used to strive to want to be this thought leader and all those things, where now I'm just like, man, I want to put my thoughts out there, and if it resonates, it resonates. But what I've come to be really confident in is being able to see the future, betting on it, and being even more seeing it happen. I was like literally reading something I spoke about in 2021. I spoke in 2021 in like November about we're heading into a hopeless society. And so, we're heading there in a hopeless society. And then, some of the content of what me and you were pre-gaming talking about, things that a lot of, some people are starting to really talk about, that we're heading into a hopeless, society, crisis, and all these things. And so something that small, I just have realized, I can kind of see, for whatever reason, God's given me the ability to see ahead and then prepare not only myself and others for what's there. But what's hard about that, a lot of times you're speaking to something that doesn't exist yet. And so many people think you're crazy. Even people who you're close to will think you're crazy. When I would talk in the church world about, man, churches have to start thinking differently about how they do it. And so me being bivocational, or I say having two jobs, really, it's not like half and half. I mean, I'm really, I work a lot. But now that's becoming a even bigger trend in the U.S. among churches. Because why? The financial numbers don't make sense. It never made sense. Now you could when the market's thriving, and you're going to start to see that. So we've already built stuff to prepare ourselves for that. Or when I would talk about, man, in the church space, man, the church has consolidated power. You got to get power in the hands of people, send them out. Now that's a lot of the conversation. What are we doing? Volunteerism isn't what it used to be. How are we empowering people to go? It's the whole thing we were talking about, innovative reconcilers. In our business space, we were saying it from the beginning. All this stuff is going to be, all the stuff about DEI and where it's going to go and what's going to happen. And we were just like, man, it's about culture. It's about authentic leaders in the future. And we were like, and then for me, I was like, well, maybe I'm wrong about this. And so I would hedge that for so long. Now, everything from McKinsey and everybody else is coming out about that stuff. And so I think for me, I'm just like, I think that's where I am so just with my feet in the ground, like, no, I think I kind of see it, and I'm just going to keep pushing that direction. And if I'm a thought leader that has a voice where millions listen to, or if it's just a thought leader that only, 75 listen to, what I do know is whoever those people are will be people that will impact the millions, and it may be both and, where I'm impacting the millions and these people are impacting the tens of millions or whatever, because it spreads out, because I think that's just kind of where we're at.
Mm-hmm. And the realities of that, being somebody who is intuitive and is thinking a lot about the world and where it's going to be, first, I think that it comes at a cost to you, because you're not, what you carry inside is not just your life.
Yeah.
Like you carry a lot of people's, and I would say the world's grievances and where you think it's going to go. You're always thinking about that, and you feel it inside, and I'm really grateful for it. And at the same time, that's really hard because what do they always tell you? If people aren't paying for it, like, is it important? Like, if the market's not asking for it, and if people aren't paying for it, like, you must not be that good. And I don't know. I have a smaller amounts of experience, but my experience to this point has been that that's not always true. And I think that that's not always true for a very little amount of people, but we do go above and beyond on trying to help people see what it is that we see.
Yeah.
And when we do a good job with that, people are like, oh, it completely tracks.
Yep.
And so it does, just because people aren't coming to your door like begging for it, doesn't mean that you don't have something that they need.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a spot on, Bri, because I think that, when you think of great inventions and things, people, Steve Jobs was really ahead of his time. I mean, they kicked him out of Apple. And I think that here's what it comes down to. When you know and you're confident in it, it just works. Because even lately, we've been dealing with this where, we've been having conversations, and you've done a great job. And I tell people, this is why you need people it's why you need people on your team who will push you, and you need to be able to give people a voice. I mean, like, you are 24, but I always use the age because I want people to understand, like, people 24 aren't a lot of times empowered to help lead, $1 million business. They're just not. And I say that because, like, you have a voice. And so the one thing you've been doing a great job is pushing me to say, hey, I don't feel like we're being who we need to be. This is why we got into this. This is what we say. But I feel like we're working with clients. We're not really doing that. And you've been really, like, harping on that. And it was so true, and it was good. Because then we're just like, yeah, and all of a sudden, finally, I was like, no, we need to go here. And then we just have kind of went to clients of late and be like, nope, we're doing this, this, and this. And if you can't, and in a sense, kind of like, if not, we'll just walk away. And we're talking about walking away for a lot of money. And you know what? Almost every one of our clients are like, oh, yeah, they see it now. It's like it all fit. But it wasn't because they didn't see it before. I just think that I'm just now, like, confident saying, no, this is the drawing line. So you don't have to. We're good. We'll go somewhere else. And I'm watching, and I think that's where we're going to see some of the best results. And so I credit you for the constant push to kind of keep us on mission. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, no, this is who we are. This is what we do. And I think that, but it is hard sometimes because you really do. Not everybody, you're right. It's not for everyone. But the ones who do get it, they love it. And they're like, no, this is it. We need to have this, and we need to do this. And I tell people, man, there's plenty of other people doing the stuff. And listen, and some of that stuff is needed right now. Mm-hmm. But I think for the future and where the market's headed and where people are going, no. I think we're raising up. I think the world, like you said, the world will belong to leaders. The world's going to belong to leaders coming up because of, I think, what we're entering into. I think not only emotionally, I think in the economics of our world, I think in the global issues of our world, it's going to be leaders leading crisis. Managers don't. And so it's just about how are we going to raise them up.
Right. And when you break that down to, you think of a CEO or just, someone who's in charge and the stressors that they already face.
Yeah.
Like I feel like Gen Z can kind of miss on this a little bit because I do think that people who are leading very large.
That. Talk to Gen Z. Bri. Talk to them a little bit.
I do think that, people who are leading organizations and things like that, like, there's a level of payment, whether that's financial or other things that person should receive because it is stressful.
Bri, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but it is so true. And I'm glad you said that. It's like sometimes it's kind of like the person, like, sometimes like if being black and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say this to black people because, like, sometimes like some people can't say this, what I mean? Like, and it's like this with black people, we need to deal with this, right? But like Gen Z, they do. Like, listen. If you are sitting at the top of the food chain making the money, and you take the responsibility, when something hits the fan, there's no day off. There's no, like, they're not calling you. There's no, like, you're not responsible for it. And I understand we've seen employers and CEOs take like exorbitant amounts of, bonuses, and they took a loss.
Yeah, we're not talking about people who lack integrity.
Yeah, we're talking about just no, it's not equal. It's not. Listen, I am trumpeting this, and I would love to hear more of your thoughts. I am trumpeting the thing of people. You can choose your life. You can choose, man, I want to work 40 hours. I want to make this. But then do not get upset when the same person, they may put 50 or 60 hours in, you know what, and they may move up. That's okay. They've chosen to do that, and that's what they want to do. And it's like, well, they should pay me more. Okay, well, this person decided not to. They decided to put some extra work in. And so, you know what, more FaceTime with the boss, more whatever to move up. That's just it. And because you chose what life you want. This is the life they're choosing. But in the same thing, the life you choose, the results, you live with the results of that. And I just think sometimes that gets a little bit twisted. So anyway, I'll shut up. What do you think?
No, I 100% agree. I think that as people start being a little bit more aware and refining the things that are important to them, it's completely okay for somebody to say that they only want to work 40 hours a week. But then you have to choose a job where that's what's required.
Yeah.
And nothing more is required. And you have to be okay with the kind of money that you're going to be provided or the resources that you're going to be provided. If you're saying, oh, my family is more important or my hobbies is more important, know that in a way is your life payment, that you have really more good time to get to do those other things. And it's not going to look monetary. But for somebody who is also deciding that I'm not going to get to spend time with my family, I'm never going to get to turn my phone off. Like, there are people who never get to turn their phone off. And so when we're in that age where it's like, which I'm all for, like silence and solitude and mindfulness and all of those kinds of things. Like, if you want that kind of lifestyle, like, there are people who are at their cost putting that aside. And I do think that people should get paid for that, especially if that is something that's there, because if it's not there, I also believe if it's not there, they should be the first person that gets the cut.
There it is. And it's what you said earlier. We're not talking about integrity.
Yeah.
We're not talking about doing right by people. We're just talking about, hey, all things being equal. Yeah, man, like, it's just different. And here's the thing, and this is kind of a rant, but I think that the same way people would talk about hustle and they would make it to be like this moral high horse that they grind, other people don't. Man, I think that mindfulness shit and all that is become that. It's become this like high horse. I'm better than you because I take all this time out.
It's a religion.
Yeah, I take all this time out for myself, and look what I do. You're doing this. You're caught up in the machine. You're just working this way. You're not taking care of this, blah, 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 all that. And here's what I'll tell you. As somebody who legit has worked himself to a point to where he got sick and had some level of burnout, the burnout wasn't the work. It was the fact of the emotional side. And here's the thing, though. In that, Bri, God used that to bless a lot of people and has done a lot of things that launched a lot of people. And I wish I would have taken on some of the emotional things, but do I regret? No. And I think that's what people like. I'm kind of over it, because what it's turned into, I heard Mark Sayer say it best. People are just exporting their weaknesses now. Now I need to hire a coach to come do this and come do this, and hey, come do this and come do this and come do this. And it's now become this moral high horse. And I don't like it. I see it in the church world when people with Sabbaths, and it's made me like, again, I believe the Bible. The Bible says take a Sabbath. I really believe in it, but it's made me it makes me frustrated because everybody makes it now this whole thing where I'm like, you don't even work hard enough to do that. Like, you work your butt off. It's like we're supposed to do it. There's a reason why it was implemented. But beyond that, I just think it's this moral high horse now, and I think it's going to get turned upside down because you don't get what you if you choose this life, or you've been talking about this, if you grab a hold of one thing, you got to let go. And I love how you said that. That's your payment. You get to, man, like somebody else who may be working this, they may not get that chance to go and work on that hobby that you're able to do. That is your payment. But then also, when that person gets that promotion and they get a $50,000 raise, and maybe you get a cost of living increase, that's all you get. But then you're frustrated. You're like, well, I did this. Well, are you as productive as that person? again, it's not about time. It's about production. Because you can listen, you can be 40 hours and be an 80-hour type of production person. You should get as much money as you want. But I just think that sometimes we're just not seeing that correctly. And I think that's going to drive to more hopelessness. Because let me tell you this, you can be as mindful as you want to, ice bath, sauna. And again, I do all that stuff. That's what's crazy. I actually do that stuff. But that stuff at the end of the day, it's just a tool. It's not going to do, I mean, it's not like, that stuff's not going to like give you hope. That just helps. That's just continue helping you have better, I think, longevity of life, to live longer, to, to stresses, whatever. I think it helps, but it's not like this like magic pill that I think sometimes people think it is.
Yeah.
Well, Bri, we're just rolling. We kind of came in with a little intro, and then Bri, you started asking questions. So I guess we're gonna table. We had a really good topic. We'll table that for the next, but we're gonna keep going because I know you got a bunch more. You got a few more questions you wanted to ask. So I was like, let's just keep it rolling. So what we got?
I guess while I'm kind of talking about Gen Z, which is a little bit millennials too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like millennials can be a little bit more
yeah, that's a
thick
whole
on some of the mindfulness.
That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.
Anyway, talk about broad brushing. But can we talk about triggers? Because something that I was on TikTok today, as I do, and you know how there's always those videos that are like trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning, and I wanted to make something very clear that there's a lot of types of content that I am very grateful.
Yeah.
When I'm grateful whenever I go to watch a movie that it gives me a little heads up on the type of content that's going to be in the movie. Absolutely. I'm grateful now that with any video, people are kind of like, hey, I'm going to talk about, these things. Yep. If you don't want to hear it, keep going. Yep. I really do appreciate that. At the same time, I don't think that the things that trigger you, which I think that word is overused and therefore it diminishes what it actually means.
Absolutely.
Are other people's responsibility. And I feel like out of our because obviously when I think of a trigger, I'm like, oh, you're clearly saying there's something that's making you feel anxious. And I feel like when that happens, the first thing you're wanting to do is get it away. Get this feeling away, get this feeling away, get this feeling away. And so immediately you're wanting to place blame on the first thing that comes to your mind as to why you might be feeling that way or why that thing might be happening. And a lot of the time it's usually that this person did XYZ. And I'm not talking about a situation where somebody does something that's that is very wrong or something that is unjust. But that's not the case at this point. It's oh, you made me feel uncomfortable. And I also think that there are, daily activities or, things that people do, things that people talk about that to you might, because of something that happened in the past, might be more than that. And, you should you should recognize that and you should think through that, but that doesn't mean that person should never talk about that thing again.
That's it. That's a good point. No, Bri, you're hitting on something that's, I think, a very important topic because I've had things that at the hands of white men, let's just use that have been harmful. Well, anytime I see a white man with power, I can't be like, oh, this person has triggered me. I have to look at the intent and be in the room with someone that they may just be talking and they may say something that reminds me of something someone else does, but that's nothing within their intent. I think it's wrong. It's wrong that we broad brush every person that may say something. That gets into our topic for next week. We're living in such this heightened crisis thing that we're wanting people to do things before things even happen, where they could happen because this person said this one word or talked about this one topic, or that you walk in the room and it's a bunch of dudes in the room and they talk about football. And you're not caring, then they say, oh, that's the male patriarchy, not caring for the one woman that's in the room. You're like, No, these dudes just wanted to talk about football. That's okay. Same way, when I walk in a room and all women are talking about Barbie, for example, and they're doing that, I'm going to be like, hey, you're excluding the black man. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're talking about a white blonde woman. Like, no. My point in why I said, and it doesn't diminish when you've had real events and real trauma that have happened to you. But what we have to do is that you have to learn to, in that moment, instead of just pushing on a trigger. Okay, well, what's going on in me? Why does this trigger me? Why does this? Okay, yeah, it was that word. Okay, but then you go, okay, but that person who said that, how have they been? Have they ever treated me in any way like that? No. Okay, well, and that's, we let somebody say one thing, and then we just start defining them when they've had years with you of just proving the complete opposite. And I just think it's wrong. And I think, here's what I'll tell you. It is hindering people's actual mental health development. Mm-hmm. If everything is a trigger, and every time someone says something, you have to say that it's a trigger, and you don't want to be in any environment that does trigger you, then here's what's going to happen. The tools that you're working on in therapy and whatever, you never put them in live action. Let me tell you this, when we played basketball, we had something called dummy offense. That was 5-on-0. No one's out there. But we eventually had to play 5-on-5. Because after a while, we got used to nobody. Then all of a sudden, you put somebody else up. You're like, oh, then you have to learn how to react and move and do that. And so I think some of the lack of mental health development, because we're talking about it like we've never talked about mental health before. But as we mentioned earlier, suicide rates increased across the board 2.3% in 1 year this past year. $1 trillion in loss of production in the marketplace is happening right now because of anxiety and depression. We're not getting better. We're talking more about it. We're more aware of it, but we're not getting better. And I think some of it is because I think we're getting the right tools. Some people haven't gotten those, but those who do, they're not applying them. They're not putting them into real work. You got to get in the gym. That's one of the best things that my therapist helped me with. He's like, yeah, when I was going through stuff and I was working through these things, he was like, no, he wasn't telling me, hey, run from that environment. No, you need to be in that environment. My kids go to the therapist, and I love her, and she's phenomenal. Because one thing she tells them is like, hey, there's a difference between anxiety and stuff and stress. And she'll be like, hey, no, you're just going through some stress, and you need to suck that up and get through that right now. Like, as a therapist, she's like, hey, here's the tools we've given you. Let's go apply them. And that's how you get better. So I think these whole things of everything's a trigger thing. I love what you're saying. We've gotten better as a society. Yeah, if somebody has been abused and they're about to watch a movie with abuse in it, I love it. Says, hey, this is going to hit on it. Yes, because that's a free movie you're choosing to watch. Yeah, let me at least know what I'm about to watch. Okay, no, I can't watch it. I know where I'm at right now. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you can't get away from that. You can't get away from certain environments, and I think you got to learn how to use the tools. I don't know if that makes sense. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If that makes sense or not.
I feel like it, like when people feel the pain of something that reminds them of something, that was painful.
Yep.
I just think that, like, we're so quick to try to put that pain elsewhere rather than having to actually embrace it and deal with it.
Good point.
And we're so under-equipped on what that process of embracing pain actually looks like. Mm. And I think that, the older you get, the less people have an understanding of what that process actually looks like. It's kind of like, oh, you just get through it. Or the other side is kind of like, oh, I just need to, it's going to take me out. And that's why the work that we do is so important, because that's where the world is going. Like, these are the type of conversations that are even happening in the workplace. Yeah. And it's like when people, for me, this is an example. I'm someone who's like, I grew up in like the trenches. Like, I have some stuff that happened. And when people say, like, I barely use the word trigger yes. because yes. I'm like, I'm going to say that. I'm like, it's going to make what I'm meaning sounds so illegitimate, and like so I'll be having conversation like I don't want to use those words, and I have no other way to explain it because this word's kind of been hijacked.
Yes.
And then so that's hurtful, and then at the same time, when I hear people using the word trigger, I'm triggered because then I'm like, I'm anticipating somebody using that word to kind of like manipulate me to be responsible for the things that have happened for them.
Yeah.
And that's 50% because that is what people do, and 50% because I'm someone who overly takes responsibility.
Yep.
So even within that interpretation is 50% because of the things that I don't like process correctly when it comes to carrying responsibility. And it's like and that happens at work. Like that happens whenever I'm like meeting with direct reports that I have to think through real time and know how to have a conversation like back and forth about. And that's just going to happen more and more, especially within the workplace. And we don't have leaders who are equipped to do that and who are able to teach, especially those who are younger that are coming into the workplace, how to work through it properly.
Yeah. No, it is because what you're getting to is what we talk about. This idea of being an authentic leader, being self-differentiated, is that I can have empathy. I think the older generation is like, oh, just get through it. I'm like, well, no, we didn't. This is what we did. We just stuffed it down and became dysfunctional. We didn't healthily deal with it. Gen X and boomers, we didn't deal with like trauma well. It was just like, suck it up, get through it, and then it's like, well, and then on the other side, look at me, and you're like, well, look at you. Yeah, there's a bunch of crap that you didn't come out there healthy. But then we don't have empathy. But also, I think on the other side, it's just with and again, I want to be. We say millennials and Gen Z. I don't even think it's that. I think it's just your social construct, how you grew up. Because think about like if you're in Africa right now, or if you're I don't know, you're in a third world country. Third world country, they're not acting like people who are in a third world country are probably not functionally acting like how we would say Gen Z is actually acting.
Because they don't even have survival necessities.
Yes, in a first world context. So we have to be understanding because like it's just different. But what I will say, we use that word, and I know your story. I think that's and I know a few other stories of people who have horrible things, and they don't use those words. And then I hear somebody say, "Oh yeah, when I was in the third grade, and my gym coach cussed at me. You know, I've got childhood trauma." I'm like, shut up. Like I really want to say, no, you don't. No, you like that's not that. You don't use that word. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm very clear to say, like, even like racism, like, I've had very clear racist things said to my face, called the N-word, blah, blah, blah. Even back then, I was careful because, like, I watched my grandfather. Like, I tell people a story. My great grandfather pastored churches in Mississippi and Memphis. He would be on his way to pastor a church with hanging bodies on trees. Dog, that is different than what I went through. Doesn't mean that, but it's different. And I think if what you're saying, if you don't, it becomes so watered down that people with real stuff, it doesn't have it's like it just ends up watering everything down. So now you know what happens? It makes people not believe that people are actually going through stuff because they're like, oh, I'm having some trauma. And they're like, oh, well, okay. Because everybody's watered that word down.
Which is like the worst thing that could possibly happen.
It's the worst thing that can happen. That's why I tell people, stop using that word trauma, triggered. And again, unless, and I don't know, some people disagree with this, unless that thing is like, I'm not saying, man, I've got some, like, I would say this. I'm very careful. I know at times some childhood trauma, whatever. I want to be careful. Realistically, I had some stuff happen to me. But it's hard for me to categorize what I went through as trauma. I went through some stuff that sucked, but I wasn't like abused. Like I was someone, I wasn't physically like beaten or emotionally like annihilated, beaten down. I wasn't. I had some tough stuff though. But I think that's where we have to just be careful with that. And I think you're right. Just those words are used so much. Oh, this person said this is trigger. And I'm like, and I think what ends up happening is that that's what I think gives the older generation a bad rap toward the younger generation. And I think the older generation has to have more empathy, but I think the younger generations, I think they need to have some responsibility to stop saying some of those things. You need to come on, you need to stop saying, my kids and I talk about that all the time. Like, my kids not like, no. Like, I know my kids. I know I'm not the perfect parent. I know my wife, she's not the perfect mom. But for my kids to say, hey, man, I had some childhood trauma, they didn't. Like they had some tough stuff for sure, but childhood trauma, no shot. And so no, that's a hey, listen, you brought up a very interesting you brought up a very interesting topic, and I think it's like I think it's but I appreciate you being where you're at, bringing that up, because what it does, it brings real validity sometimes into the conversation, because I can just be like me as the older guy just saying this, but you as someone who's living in it saying no, and here's the thing, and I know your story. So I know the legitimacy of what you're saying. If anyone had the reason to talk about trauma and triggers, you would. But I don't very rarely ever hear you say that stuff, even though that you would have every right to say those things. But I've also watched you work through your stuff in real time. And I want everybody to know there's moments to where, with you and helping you, where there's times where I'm like, I've said no, like, hey, you go home, blah blah blah. But then there's been times where, even recently, where there may be stuff going, and I'm like, hey, because of the position you have, when you show up here, it's game on, and that could seem unloving and not caring. Man, do you not know her story? And I'm like, yep, I do, but I also know too that this is the next level for your growth, is to be able to still deal and process, but still show up.
Yeah. And
I think that's I don't know. So let me ask you that question before we close. When like that moment's happened where I'm like, hey, I need for you to show up this way. How has that made you feel? And how have you kind of like, what do you take from that? Mm-hmm.
I think that when you think of, people who have gone through like big T traumas, because I've heard that ways to like compartmentalize it a little bit, like little T's or like, stressors of life, that kind of thing. Yeah. But like the big T's, one of the biggest things that happens is you feel like you don't have, you lose all sense of like self. And so you kind of feel like everything in life just happens to you and you don't have any ability to respond. Okay. It's like you have no control, essentially. Okay. And so why I preface that is because in that moment, like for someone who's been through something of that sort, you feel like you don't have the opportunity to respond. So then if I feel like I don't have the opportunity to respond in that moment, I could paint you as the person who originally didn't give me the opportunity to respond as a child, if that makes sense. Good point. And so it's like, that's how like you think of like a trigger or something. It's like, that's how that can play out in real time. That doesn't mean it's your responsibility. It doesn't mean that you are that person. And so that's where you have to learn how to like speak truth to yourself in those situations. But it's knowing that like in that moment, I could 100% say like, I know this is what you're asking of me right now, and I don't think that I could do it. Like I don't think that because of what I'm carrying, I don't think I'm going to be able to meet that expectation. And that would actually be completely fair. But the point is that I'm responding and I'm making that decision in response to what you are asking of, but also knowing like what I'm giving up at the same time. Yeah. And so I think that I do think that that's the biggest thing. Is that it would be completely fair. Yeah. But for me personally, like that's not the route that I took. Like the route that I took, specifically because I work in a workplace where, I was given room. Like you said, there's days where it's like, hey, I can tell. Like it's like you slept 1 hour. Like you should probably go home. I know you're going to finish all your work. Or it's like, hey, we have this really big meeting. I need you to be like 100 in this meeting. And then after, like, do what you need to do, come back at this time or whatever. Like there's flexibility there because you had understanding, and not every work environment is going to be that way. And so I can 100% say if I was in a different environment, like I'm not sure that I would have just been able to tell myself rise to the occasion. You know what I mean? Because that's not where I was. Like that's not what I was able to do at the time, even with like priorities. So it was like, I can tell a priority is that I'm going to need to be able to do, these things for me to be able to show up better in the future. But luckily I work somewhere that gave a little bit more room. But I will say part, like why I chose no, like, yes, I am going to do that is obviously because we have the relational equity and you have like given me that kind of room in the past. And also because of just like timing and having the self-awareness to know when something is painful, but the refinement is important.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like seasonally and where I want to go and where I am right now, even though it is going to be painful to have to like it comes with a cost to walk into a room and have so much stuff going on elsewhere and have to show up a different way. Yep. And that's another example of why I'm like, yeah, like the people in charge, like the people who are leading, like they get to make the money. It's like, you have no idea that you might see, like, it might seem like money is removing all of these inconveniences to their life, but that's not true. Most of the time, that's not true at all. Yep. Especially when you're in leadership, not everybody needs to know everything. And in the name of authenticity, sometimes leaders will dump things onto the people, and that can be verbally or emotionally or and so I think that could be something as small as like me coming in with a certain mood because of something else. That's putting something onto the people that I'm expecting to show up a certain way too. And so because of that, I have to compartmentalize a lot more than what a 24-year-old girl would typically do. Yeah. And that is costly. However, like I am in the position to where I have somebody that's you who knows how to navigate those things and does have the EQ to where I do get to bring those things to like dump the box at the same time to where you're aware of like, oh, I can tell this is how you're feeling today. I know that you have all this stuff you're kind of putting to the side, or you can't show up this way with other people. So you can come to this place and you can dump the box here in order to help me show up how I'm supposed to in other areas. Yeah. Does that make sense?
No. It makes, and I appreciate putting, color around it. Is that I think in summing it up, it's that there was a process to get there. And there was a relational equity. I think as leaders, we have a responsibility. I do think that as best as you can, as much as someone's willing to open up, that whole thing of like, well, business professional. I'm like, well, your business and personal. Well, your personal life it affects your business life. So as much as someone's willing to open up, I think it's important for people to have an understanding at least of what's going on. They don't have to know all the details of what's going on, but like, hey, if I think a boss needs to make sure that they at least know what's going on, or somebody who you're working with is going through a divorce, I think that's important. And let's say all of a sudden they find out then their spouse, has drained their account and they've done this multiple times. Well, man, as a boss, okay, that's going to, you should know that and say, okay, how am I giving this person room, blah, 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 to work through that. Hey, are you getting help that you need? Are you getting this? Da, 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 and then work them through it. But for you did the work. But then there's like that next step was like, hey, but we're here now. We got to kind of take this step. And you were able to, and you had the room to grow into it. You know what I mean? And so I think, but having the room to grow into it, you also had the ability to respond. You know what I'm saying? I think that's where sometimes we just got to help people, you have to help them grow in all those different areas. Sometimes it's not pleasant or whatever. Because for me, it'd be like, I'm like the dad. I'm like, yeah, whatever you need. Like, just go do whatever. But sometimes like, no, but I do need this right now. And so.
And to be fair, whenever we're working with companies, like we understand that our dynamics here are even unique. And that's part of why we push levels of authenticity, because how things look here is different than what it's going to look like even within the companies that we work with. It's like, I have a relationship with Adrian's family. Like Adrian is my boss, and then he is also my pastor. And so there are other levels that bring different things into the equation that are completely appropriate for the circumstances that we're in. But there might be there are times where like Adrian shows up to work and like boss hat, and he's like, no, we can't talk about that right now. Or no, we need to do this thing. And so it is a little bit of a dance. And that's why we're so big on what we talk about, because things are so gray and there's so many nuances, and people need to be in the place to be able to be self-aware and resilient to remain self-aware so that they continue to navigate the gray, especially because things are just going to get more and more and more nuanced.
They are. And I think relationship and authentic leadership is about like being able to lead and find wisdom in the midst of that gray. And so I 100% agree. And so, well, Bri, Man, I'm saying this, like, I actually enjoy the conversation. I like every one we do, but this one was actually a pleasant surprise in the sense that we had a whole topic we're going to talk about, and then we just started talking, kind of doing our normal opening, and it just went from there. So it was really, really cool. So, guys, I hope that this was helpful for you. Would love your feedback. Would love your thoughts. And here's the thing, man. Everything that we talked about here, it's not for everyone. And also, don't take it as like gospel. Don't take it as everything is 100% like accurate. Some stuff works for you. Some stuff may not work for you. Our thing is to find the stuff that actually impacts. Take one thing maybe you heard, process, apply, keep moving. Because in the world that we're heading in, the world's in desperate need of authentic leaders. We believe authentic leaders are people who like write new rules. They know they're going to play by a set of rules, but they're actually playing, but they're going to find out the rules that were actually meant to them. Until next time, keep writing the rules.